You are listening to the Let Me Overthink About It podcast, where I dive into a series of topics that occupy my anxious mind. I'm Sam Madore, overthinker extraordinaire. This week, I'm overthinking about mindset with Jen Meza. Jen is a creative in all senses of the word. She's originally from Vancouver, but lives in Halifax with her family, and she is a #1 Amazon bestseller. Here's our chat. I am here with Jen Meza. Hey, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. We're having a few technical difficulties recording this one. Hopefully, we'll be able to get through this. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for asking me. I love listening to podcasts, so it's always exciting when I get invited to be on one.
I agree. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, honestly. It's only when I drive that I ever even think to turn them on. And I do love when I'm in the car by myself, listening to a podcast is my favorite. So, Jen, I've been trying this season to not predetermine what topics we overthink about in advance. However, I broke the rules with you because I've been following you on Instagram, knowing that you're offering some new things on your Instagram account, selling for great. And so I thought I need to talk to you about mindset.
All right, I love that.
So I want to get right into it because, of course, when you think about overthinking, mindset is such a key component to, training yourself away from overthinking, or at least catching yourself, I think. So maybe you can just give us sort of a Reader's Digest version, Jen, or a description of what mindset means to you.
Um, Really, to me, it's knowing you can control how you think. That was something I learned, I feel, in my mid-20s, which really changed my life to know that you don't have to believe everything you think.
What?
It's shocking, isn't it?
Yes. It is shocking to somebody who struggles with anxiety, for sure, who's an overthinker, who it's like, and sometimes you just have to, I don't know about you, but you just have to remind yourself of those simple little things where you're just like, oh, wait, that's just what I'm telling myself. It doesn't have to be reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I had a really negative mindset in my like maybe teenage years, early 20s. And then my mom bought me the book, The Secret. And
Okay.
that's what kind of opened my mind to mindset and manifestation and really choosing to think differently and, using affirmations or just changing a thought when you have it, if it's a negative one.
So how do you do that? Walk me through that, because that's the hardest thing for me to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not easy for me too, but I feel like as I'm getting older, I can see myself handling things differently. Um, a good question you can ask yourself is this true? Like, is this absolutely true? Especially when you have negative thoughts about yourself, like, oh, I'm not, like, for example, today, I went to book my parent teacher interviews for my kids.
Yeah.
And I was 30 minutes late. They had closed the system. And I'm a big procrastinator. And I just got in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get anything right. Why am I like this? I'm not good at anything. And it was just such a little thing. And you just have to stop yourself and think, okay, I'm probably not the only parent that did that. Is this absolutely true? It's like, no, I just made a mistake.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's stepping back, and taking a look as if you were an outsider, because a lot of times you wouldn't think things about your friends or say certain things to your friends that you would say to yourself. Um, so a lot of times I have to just pause and step back and realize that I'm thinking negatively.
Honestly, I just feel like if you really did think, would I ever say this to another human being other than myself? 9 times out of 10, when you're in that negative spiral, it's like, absolutely not.
Yeah, for sure.
It's unbelievable the things we say to ourselves and the lies that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, we are so critical.
Yeah. If I can ask, which I know technically I'm not supposed to, I'm using that in air quotes, supposed to ask you your age. So you said that was like your mid-20s. How old are you now, Jen?
I just turned 44.
Right. So you've been doing this work for a while.
Oh yeah, I became basically obsessed with reading personal development books.
Yeah.
And a lot of the podcasts I listen to are personal development. And I do feel like it's made a huge difference in my life.
I think too, and that's amazing. And I think too, and maybe you can agree or disagree here, is do you feel that there's an ebb and a flow though? Like, do you feel like you have to keep reminding yourself of these things or
Oh,
are you,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I definitely have my ups and downs, and picking up a new book is a great way to kind of spark that in me again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely gone through, ebbs and flows for sure.
And I think too, you mentioned about books, and I love Mel Robbins. I don't know if you're a fan of Mel
Yeah.
Robbins. She's one of my faves. As a 40, I guess I probably wasn't even 40 actually when that book came out. I'm just a year younger than you. Is Mindset Reset when she started, it was before her book came out, sorry, before the 5 minute rule came out. And it was her, she did this Mindset Reset where it was this free course. And it was the first time that I ever actually gave thought to mindset, which I was like, I feel like I'm late to the party, but it was really overwhelmingly positive for me to actually start thinking about it.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm not familiar with that, but I did read the 5 minute, what's it? 5 minute
5 minute rule, I think it's
rule.
called. I
Yeah.
have it here somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely opens your mind to, I think, new possibilities, and just knowing that you can go after what you want.
Mhm.
A lot of my life, I don't know if I've held myself back, but I held myself to the mold that I thought I had to fit, that was told to me by society or even my parents, getting that government job. And it just wasn't for me. And now I'm okay with ta- taking a more creative route.
Because so, and you were, maybe just give a little background on that because you left a job, it was a career for, and maybe just give us some insight into taking that leap into a more creative field.
Well, I worked for WestJet for 8.5 years, and
Hmm.
I loved it. And then COVID hit, and I ended up taking an early out, and I was off work for maybe 6 months during that time.
Right.
And it gave me a little taste of what it was like to be an entrepreneur and to be creative. And I created a journal to encourage Nova Scotians to get out and explore their own backyard. And that ended up becoming an overnight Amazon like #1 bestseller, which was
Yes.
shocking, but
Yeah.
super, super cool. And I filled my time with, I was sewing masks and selling masks
Mhm.
before they were available. And the journal, I make woven wall hangings. And so I started a little side hustle with that and selling kits. And it was really fun. But in my head, I still thought, okay, now I have to start applying for real jobs, quote
Right.
unquote.
Mhm.
And my parents always wanted me to get a government job, and they said I'd be set for life with the pension and whatnot. And I ended up getting in with the government, and I kept looking for other positions within the government that I might be more interested in.
Yeah.
And nothing sparked my interest. And going to a Monday to Friday job where I was sitting all day dealing with customers who didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
It was not filling my cup.
Mm.
Felt like I needed permission.
Isn't that interesting? Like, from who? Permission from who?
From my parents,
right?
mostly from my parents. My husband's always supportive of anything I want to do.
Yeah.
So he's like, if that's what you want to do, then do it. But I really felt like I would let my parents down if I left that government job.
Mhm.
But I also felt like the longer I stayed there, the more stuck I would feel because now you're
Yeah.
moving up the ladder, getting benefits, whatnot. But it turns out my parents just wanted me to be happy and they were okay. Um, they were more than okay with me leaving. And my dad was an entrepreneur, so I think it kind of excited him that I was going to go out on my own.
Mm.
Um, so I ended up quitting and I've been doing social media management for a couple of different clients. Um, I do content creation and I find like little things here and there just to fill my time and to get a creative outlet.
That's really cool. And, I love that. And it's so interesting how, you said it turns out they just wanted me to be happy, right? It's like, and obviously you knew that on some level, but, just it takes taking that leap or having that conversation. Sometimes you forget that it's just as easy as having that conversation with them and telling them, and then you can find out how they really still support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I took my mom for her birthday to get her hair done. And the girl doing her hair, this was just last week, she said to my mom, like, what advice would you give to someone? Because it was her 82nd birthday. And my mom
Oh,
said to find a job that makes you happy. Because my mom worked in Scotia Bank all of her life and she absolutely loved it. But
right.
she said, she talked to people who have these jobs and they're just miserable. She said, I can't imagine doing that. So that kind of reassured me that I made the right decision.
Right. And what makes her happy isn't going to make you happy. It's going to be completely relative to the person. I
Yeah.
think there's so much pressure on us to, or, and I think about the lies we tell ourselves. And it's like we assume that that's what they want for us, or we assume, oh, this person's going to think that if I do this, when really, we really don't know unless we ask.
In the end, it really doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I've
That's
learned
right.
that lesson.
That's a hard lesson to learn, Jen, because it's like, I don't know about you, but and I think too in the social media realm in the world, it's like that comparison just always seems to be lurking in the background.
Well, I think there's been times in my life where I've wanted to pursue something and I've told my idea to someone and I've had them talk me out of it.
Mm,
And I've looked back on those times and regretted not pursuing it. And I realized that, just not everyone will see the same vision as you will. And that's
yeah,
okay. And if you have a vision, it's because you were meant to pursue it.
agreed. And would you qualify yourself as an overthinker?
Probably, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think about that too, right? The minute that somebody starts to kind of put that doubt in your head, then it's so easy to fall into, well, maybe they're right, and going back and forth and hemming and hawing and overthinking that until you just decide, okay, it's just not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Those,
Yeah.
and now I'm very particular on who I tell people, like who I speak to about certain things.
Yeah.
Because you want people who are there to support you and not to bring you down. So I have certain people that I know I can go to for that support.
That's so important. And that's a lesson learned too, I bet, because like you probably learn the hard way. Oh, maybe I don't go to that person to tell to tell that to. And
Yeah.
then also, there's the flip side to that where you're like, I, maybe have to just lay it out in the front to say, hey, I'm just looking for, a sounding board or somebody to bounce some ideas off of, not necessarily, advice.
Yeah. And I mean, I said that my husband is very supportive and he is, but when I wrote the journal, the Nova Scotia Adventure Journal, he was like, oh yeah, that's cute. Like he thought he'd be happy if, a couple people bought one. And in the end, it turned out it was just a really good timing for what was going on in the world and in Nova
Yeah.
Scotia. But if I had kind of taken on his perspective on what I was doing, I probably wouldn't have put it out there. I would have just, made it and then tucked it aside and not
Yeah.
shared it with anyone.
Yeah, it is so funny. Let's name it. What's the name of your book?
It's called Our Best NS Adventure Journal.
I love it. I think it's great. And that's actually my first introduction to you was seeing that on, I can't remember who, somebody shared it on Instagram or whatever. And that was my first introduction to you. And I just absolutely love it. Am I
Thank
right
you.
in saying you have a PEI one too, or did I make that up?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
do. Yeah. Yeah, I was very fortunate. A lot of people shared it. And I think it was because we were in this time where we couldn't leave the province. And
Yeah,
it was a great opportunity for people to get out there and put money back into their own economy and really explore Nova Scotia. Because I think a lot of Nova Scotians, they have that one cottage that they go to, or they go to Florida, you know what I mean? But they don't really take the time to travel around.
yeah.
And I think it all just fit in with really good timing, to be honest.
Well, and I think, and I talk about this a lot on here and in bits and bobs, is like the positive stuff that came out of COVID. And, that's definitely one of them is sort of appreciating what you have close by or appreciating, well, you've already talked about, taking a beat and kind of seeing, okay, what can I create? That time might not have happened if you hadn't had COVID and hadn't had those days off work.
When I lost my job with WestJet, I kept telling myself this is happening for me and not to me. And
Mm.
I don't know where I read that or heard it, but it was stuck in my head. And I really feel like even though it was such a hard time, it really did open up a whole new life for me, really.
Oh, I really like that a lot. Happening for me, not to me. Talk about mindset.
Yeah, because I'm the type of person I can get pretty down on myself, and I loved my job. I loved my coworkers. I had a plan to stay there for 6 more years because then I was eligible to retire with travel benefits. So I
Mm.
wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. If I hadn't worked on my mindset, it could have taken me down like a spiral, right? So yeah, I just kept telling myself it's happening for me.
And when you say you can be down on yourself in this context, are you thinking like, woe is me, sort
Oh
of?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I was like that quite a bit in my early 20s. For example, my dad passed away in December.
So sorry.
Thank you. I feel like I'm handling it so much better because I'm like, okay, I'm going to work out. I'm going to, read these books, and I'm going to therapy, and I'm doing all these things to help my mental health. Whereas in the early days, it was just like, woe is me, like you said.
Yeah. Really leaning into the negative of it.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And I just want to address too, which I say a lot on here. People who listen to this podcast are probably like, oh, here she goes again. But it's like, it's okay to be there too, right? To be in
Yep.
that negative and to sit there. But it's about making sure that you don't stay there.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you've shared a little bit about this on your Instagram account about your relationship with your dad, how that sort of ebbed and flowed and changed over the years as well. And I find it really interesting because, of course, I lost my mom right at the start of COVID, and we were so close. And I've had lots of conversations with folks who, you're close to your parent and they die, it's one thing. But then if you're not close to them and they die, it's a whole other thing, right? There's just
Yeah.
this weird kind of balance.
I feel like for myself, and I understand because I'm very close with my mom, and she's still here, and I
Mhm.
think it would and will be a very different experience. But with my dad, I feel like part of the grief is grieving the relationship we never got to have and the relationship that I wanted to have with him. And
Yeah.
he was diagnosed with brain cancer in October, and they said he had about a year. And a friend of mine whose dad passed away suddenly told me, well, you just have to make this year the best year ever. And I felt like we had time to like repair a
Yeah.
relationship. And um and then it was less than 2 months he passed away. But
Wow.
I do feel like, I was there for him at the end, and we did have, some special moments.
Mhm.
But I do feel like part of it is grieving that we won't get the opportunity to really have the relationship I always wish we would.
And I'm sorry to hear that. And that's what I've heard from others as well, is you're grieving the relationship you didn't have as opposed to the one that you did.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, grief is such an interesting beast. And I know you're very early in the stages after having lost your dad, but where that becomes a bit of a mindset as well. Like, I keep going back to the same topic, but it's like I feel like you do have to, part of the mindset is allowing yourself to feel this way, which is actually something you have to work on. It's like I have to work on being okay with feeling this shitty,
Yeah.
basically.
It's pretty crappy. And it happened
Yeah.
like it was December 9th, and like this Christmas, I also got sick. Like I had a cold, nasty cold, but over Christmas, I laid in bed pretty much for like maybe 4 or 5 days straight. And
Mm.
my husband thankfully took over, the gifts and wrapping and everything so that the kids could still have a good Christmas. But I just had to feel it. Like I couldn't fake my way out of it.
Yeah. And man, the benefit of having a support system for that, just hearing what you're saying about your husband, and you think, how lucky we are. And I put myself in that same category. I don't have kids, but I have a husband who's very supportive, and how lucky you are to have that support. And what if you don't, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I started going to therapy.
Awesome.
My last session, she told me like kind of how to put away the thoughts so that I could, continue on with my day and not go into like a dark place. And that actually really helped. So it's like the thoughts are there for later when you need to go to them, but like right now, like let's put them away.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Is that like a visualization, or how do
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah, basically, she kind of said, put them in a container, your thoughts in a container. What would that look like? And we kind of went through that. And then at the end of the session, I closed my eyes and she kind of guided me through that. Um, so it's something I've actually used it since then on my own. And
Mhm.
it's really a good way for like a mindset tip, really.
I can see, like, it's not like, at first I was thinking that almost sounds like bottling up your like,
It
but it's not
does, yeah.
but it's not the feeling, it's the thought. Like, maybe, am I understanding? Like, it's not really the feeling of it, it's actually just that thought.
Well, I told her the second session I had with her, I had been, I had a few weeks where I was feeling really good. I felt like myself again. And then we had a session, and I told her, I said, after that, like I was really down for like a week and I couldn't get myself out of it. And so she said, well, I think maybe we need to like place even the feelings aside.
Yeah.
Um, so I was able to do that this time.
And I think it's really about setting boundaries with yourself, it
Yeah.
sounds like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, you still have to be a mom, and you still have to do your job, and you still have to prioritize other things.
Yeah, that's the hardest part I find is, your world feels like it stops, but you look around and you have to keep up.
Yeah.
Especially with kids, like I'm okay with showing my emotion in front of them, but I don't want it to be overwhelming to them. Um, so you kind of have to just keep going.
This brings up an interesting point about just around vulnerability in general, is obviously being vulnerable in front of your kids, which is it's a whole thing to consider, really, is how vulnerable do you allow yourself to be in front of your kids. But also there's the vulnerability that goes out on social media too, when you're posting these things and you're sharing those stories. I personally believe, obviously, from hosting this podcast, that I'm comfortable sharing my story, and I hope and know that it helps people. How do you feel about being that vulnerable out on social media?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Before my dad passed away, after he was diagnosed, it felt like I felt like a fraud because I still wanted to
Mm,
post on social media and that's where my business is. And but I was in a different place, like, because I just found out
yeah.
my dad had brain cancer, and it was kind of that, like, where do you draw the line? Do I open up and discuss this on my social media page in front of people I don't actually know in person, or
Mhm.
do I just pretend that's not going on in my life and post as normal? And I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore because I felt I didn't want to I like to be authentic. And when I post things, I post it in the moment. I don't schedule my posts or anything. And if I'm not feeling great, I won't post a post about being feeling great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I came to a point where I decided to share what was going on, and it felt almost like a release, like it was
Mhm.
therapeutic to me, to finally, put out there what was going on in my life. Um, but yeah, I've been pretty lucky with social media in terms of people being kind to me.
Yeah.
I have some local friends who recently have been getting some pretty unkind
Oh,
messages, and I don't know how I would deal with that if I'm being honest. Like, I'm a sensitive person, so
yeah.
I'm thankful that people have been kind, and if they feel a certain way that's not kind, they haven't told me. Um, but yeah, it is a fine line to put yourself out there.
It really is. And same in terms of feeling or being sensitive, and also having kind responses. I mean, in real life, not so much. Like opening up about mental illness hasn't always received positive or supportive responses from people in my life. But on social media, I do not know what I would do. Sometimes when I read the comments that people put on other people's posts, as much as you say, oh, that's a troll or whatever that is, it's like, yeah, but it still is attacking or commenting on me personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes with social media, you forget there's a human on the other side who's actually going to
Yeah.
read these comments.
Yes.
But I want to say I appreciate when people speak about mental health because growing up, that didn't happen.
No,
And I feel like it's a different world now and it's a healthier world. And there's less shame about talking about it.
agreed. And I think too, and part of the motivation for this podcast was having mental health woven into everyday conversations, as opposed to, it doesn't have to be the number one topic of conversation, but I want it to feel like it can more easily fit into everyday conversations, because that's exactly where it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you broke your ankle,
Yeah,
talk about breaking your ankle. It's really no different.
it's true. And that's, I think, when I think about overthinking, uh it's like I feel like that's sort of a lighter way of bringing up the topic of maybe anxiety or irrational thoughts or all of those things. But ultimately, I want it to feel like we're just sitting around talking about a broken ankle, right?
Yeah, it's important for sure. And that's why I said I don't want to shy away with my kids about how I'm feeling because I feel like growing up, a lot of the not good feelings were pushed aside and not
Yeah,
shown. So
totally.
it's important to show them it's okay.
Yeah, that's why we're having conversations like this now, because we are trying to break through all of those preconceived notions of what we should be able to do or how we should be able to respond to different situations because that's basically all we knew.
Absolutely.
And I just think too, like in our early 40s. Like think about people who are like, in their 60s and, who are, trying to start having these conversations and realizing some of these feelings that they've been bottling up for so long.
I think there's a lot more talk now about breaking generational
Yeah.
traumas, is it? I was gonna say curses, but I don't think that's
That
but
works.
I'm trying to do that with the way I'm handling things and with focusing on my mental health so that it's a different experience for my own kids.
Yeah. How much of the book that you put out, like exploring Nova Scotia, exploring your home, was rooted in just things that help you with your mental health?
Oh, I needed to do something with my time because I was
Mhm.
off work, we were stuck at home, and I felt like I needed something creative to do.
Yeah.
So I did not create the journal thinking, oh, it's gonna sell and I'll go on news shows about it and blah blah blah. That was not in my head. It was just I need something to do with my time that's a creative outlet for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I did it for me. And I'm thankful that when I shared it, other people saw something in it.
Mhm. That's so cool. And to be an Amazon bestseller, what does that mean? Like, are you able to share like how many copies have been sold? Like, I'm just curious.
Oh, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, no worries.
You should have
I
asked me
should have.
before.
It's all good.
It doesn't really mean anything, but I made my own press release. So my dad was in public relations,
Oh,
and I feel like even though I wasn't really involved with his work, I feel like some of that kind of trickled down to me. And I decided to write my own press release and I sent it out to a bunch of publications, and
yeah,
that was what kind of got it out there the second time. Like the first time
right.
was the launch, and then the following year I did that. But I don't know off the top of my head how many I've sold.
All good. I'm more
Yeah.
curious than anything. Yeah, I'm just being nosy, but I do think it's really cool because it's hard to stand out, especially in publishing. It's hard to stand out because there's so many folks who are writing books or guides. And so I just think it's really cool that you were able to stand out in the midst of all that, in the midst
Yeah.
of COVID as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it had to do with timing, and it
Yeah.
just and also like Nova Scotia had just gone through the mass shooting as well.
Yes.
And we're stuck in our homes, we're stuck in our province. And I think we were like willing to grasp onto anything that was kind of positive.
Yeah.
And we're also very proud to be Nova Scotians. So I think that helped as well.
I think you're right. And yeah, to be able to go to, and especially when you think about the mass shooting happening in such a small rural area in Nova Scotia too, it's really, that pride of home and pride of place, I think was especially strong. You're right.
Yeah. It was a rough time when you look back. It's hard to believe like what we went through.
It really is. And I think too, I've joked about this before, and I know mom would approve of my joke, is like when mom died, the whole world shut down. It was like literally like, the next 2 days later, was when we had the state of emergency. So it
Wow.
was, yeah. So it was just a surreal time for us anyway. But then of
Yeah.
course add the pandemic on top of it.
Yeah. That's a
So
lot.
yeah, I can't even believe it. I can't believe it's been 4 years. And I also like it's one of those things that people say, right? It feels like yesterday, but it also feels like forever ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, that's a good question. I kind of feel like I don't know. If I'm being completely honest, I'm
That's great.
feeling like I'm searching for something. I'm searching for the next thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know. I'm hoping some opportunity comes soon.
And I like that excites me a little bit because I think as a creative, how you mentioned with the book kind of coming at the right time. I think the universe just kind of looks out for us in those situations, and the right thing comes along when it's meant to.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's okay. I'm trying, the keyword is trying to give myself grace. Like it's been a rough few months and I feel like it's okay if I'm not, working all the time and
Yeah.
doing all the things. But I do miss, I want something to focus on. I'm just waiting to figure out what that will be.
That's awesome. Absolutely allowing yourself grace. That's something I tell myself all the time. It's like, if you start to put too much pressure on yourself, it's like, yeah, but this just happened and this is where I'm at mentally. So it's just again, setting boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. I'm hoping the universe sends me something soon.
I feel
Put
it.
that out there.
I feel it's coming.
Okay, good.
Before we end our chat, I always ask my guests if they have any quotes or like inspirational quotes or things that they lean on or go to when they need to pull them out.
Well, I kind of already said the one that I try to focus on, which is life is happening for me and not
Yes.
to me. That one has been a big one.
I love that.
One I learned from Louise Hay. I'm not sure if you know who she is, but
No.
just all is well in my world. Just an affirmation to say to kind of calm myself down and just realize like, okay, things are actually okay.
Oh, I love that. I love that one too. And yes, I wrote down the other one that you said too. I love that. I'm going to use that.
It really
Yeah,
made a difference for me.
so good. I'm a quoteaholic, so I love it.
I love that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jen, for chatting with me. It's been a really great time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks again to Jen Meza for overthinking with me about mindset and grief and all kinds of things. I really enjoyed our chat and I hope you did too. Thanks also always to the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia for supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening.